Okay. Good evening. We're going to call to order the May 8th, 2018 Salem-Keizer School District Budget Committee. And we actually, before we get started on presentation of various information, I do want to clarify that given the number of reports that we're going to be hearing tonight and answers to questions that Budget Committee members provided to staff over the last week, we are going to have to limit public comment this evening, unfortunately, to the final half hour. So we will take in order those that we can in that half hour. We have added another public hearing, public testimony for next Tuesday, beginning at 6 p.m.
I think we're at 5:30.
Sorry, we're going to double check the time.
5:30.
5:30, my apologies. So next Tuesday at 5:30, we will also be taking public comment on the budget. And also the following week, we will have public comment that Monday and that Tuesday as well. But again, this evening was reserved mostly for us to get questions answered from district staff with regards to the budget. So we are going to get those answers, and we're also going to hear some presentations from staff because there were questions that we had. And so again, we apologize to those of you who we may not get to hear your public comment this evening. And it looks like I'm supposed to take attendance as well. It looks as though we have all Budget Committee members present. There are no absences to note.
Correct. All right, so I'm going to get us started here. We'll take the questions second. We'll do some presentations of information. So I promised you a quick update on Measure 98. Our high school success grant for next year. That will come in the form of a presentation. There were a number of questions around equity, and so that will come as an equity presentation. And then there were a number of questions that came up around Avid, so we will be doing an Avid presentation. I won't guarantee you that for all the equity and Avid questions that we answered them all exactly as they came in. Instead, we tried to wrap it up into a presentation. And so if at the end there's more questions, as a committee, we'll go through the question process to decide if you want more staff time spent on answering the questions. And in addition, any of the questions that we didn't get to, if as a committee you think they're valuable, to know before you can make a decision. Again, we'll take that through the committee process. So with that, I am going to start with our presentation on equity, and that will be Linda Myers, our Director of Strategic Initiatives. And in your packet, she has prepared both a handout called Equity and Budgeting, and then has provided the two key foundational policies, both the equity lens that is the school board's work and the equity policy. Linda.
All right. We will begin by looking at the Budget Committee handout that's titled Equity and Budgeting. We'll begin with the information on that side. And I will be referencing both the administrative policy and the Salem-Keizer School Board Equity Lens. But let me just give you a quick overview. I want you to have a good understanding of how the two documents complement one another. And so how does the language that staff embedded in the administrative policy and the language embedded in the school board's equity lens, how do those work together? And specifically then how was the language crafted in both of those documents utilized in some decision making around the budget? So on the equity and budgeting document, you'll see that point 4, bullet 4, pulled out of the administrative policy, acknowledging that equity is both a process and an outcome. And that is so important to us that statement is also printed on our strategic plan and is referred to on a somewhat regular basis, and that we believe that we are continually learning. And so we understand that we are still dealing with biases that we each bring to the table, and systematic structures and processes and procedures that have historically been in place. And so this concept of equity as a process is something that the board is working through and district leadership is working through simultaneously. We do that through continued learning and conversations and some willingness to be open and honest about our pasts and our personal histories and how those impact our ability to make decisions. So specifically, the administrative policy directs staff to do some different kinds of things than the board lens, and that is specifically called out in point 6.2. So the directive in the administrative policy is to actively seek and analyze relevant disaggregated data through an equity lens and use that data to inform decisions. So this administrative policy is what Superintendent Perry holds us accountable to, and she expects us to behave and work in a manner consistent with those tenets. So specifically, 6.2.1 asks us to consider how do we provide students with equitable access to teachers, curriculum, extracurriculars, and support services. There are multiple data points that we consider under that bullet. Specifically, we would look at comparability reports for highly qualified status of our paraprofessionals in our neediest schools, so schools that serve students under federal guidance with Title I money. We hold staff in those buildings to additional criteria and additional professional expectations based upon the setting that they work in. In regards to high quality curriculum, members of the board are very aware that one of the explicit look-fors in our new elementary math curriculum adoption was the availability of curricular materials available in Spanish. And so we are proud to say that the Curriculum Associates materials that we have adopted do have a complement of those materials available in Spanish, and we are excited about that. Similarly, student technology devices have been distributed and dispersed on an equity allocation. So rather than just saying everyone gets this, there has been a really solid needs analysis. Our TIS department has worked tirelessly to identify what technology devices are currently in place in schools and what technology devices are needed to ensure that students have access to internet, be it a Chromebook or a computer lab, but to ensure that all students have access to some sort of device during their regular school day. 6.2.2 deals with district practices on hiring and staffing, professional development, and district leadership. For those of you who just participated in the regular school board business meeting, you heard Executive Director of Human Resources, John Bate, share about some of the new metrics that are in place, specifically connected to our hiring, our interviewing and hiring and staff retention practices. And so that is an area where we are definitely still in process, but are pleased with some of the movement that we're making in that direction. Finally, 6.6 in the administrative policy requires us to ensure that staff receive professional development related to equity and culturally responsive practices, and that we monitor the implementation of that learning. We've had professional development opportunities galore over the course of this last year, in that we now have an actively moving Office of Student Equity, Access, and Advancement, and professional development has been provided to leadership on the topics of understanding poverty, implicit bias, and responding to racially motivated disciplinary actions. All of our middle school staff have completed training in culturally responsive teaching. Our instructional mentors have received training in culturally responsive teaching and additional training on coaching with equity. So those are the specific policy-related items, and so I want to look now at the school board equity lens. And so the school board designed this document. It was designed by the school board for the school board, and the intent and the purpose of this document is to analyze the potential impacts of decisions that the school board might make, and specifically you'll see called out an item that refers to ensuring that we get community feedback and input, specifically calling out underserved and or marginalized communities. So you'll see a bullet on the handout. The board will consider the impact of proposed changes on underserved, diverse, and marginalized individuals and groups. And the second bullet, regular data collection and analysis will reveal the effect of resource allocation policies and programs on outcomes. So when we look at communities of students who are not achieving equitable outcomes, what might that look like for the school board? So let me first frame that in district staff. And so district staff engage with families and communities in some instances through surveys. For example, we administer an annual Title III survey. Title III are federal dollars that are allocated to the district in order to ensure access and achievement for students who are learning English as a second language. The Title III survey has been distributed to families for many years, and this year we had over 300 responses back from parents. That's much, much higher than a response rate we've had in the past. And so our English language acquisition team is currently analyzing those results, and I will be meeting with that team at the end of May, and then we will determine what sort of actions or responses we may want to take in response to what we hear from parents in that survey. Similarly, we had open community forums. Those were sponsored by the Office of Student Equity, Access, and Advancement. We had great turnout. Those were hosted at Chebecca Community College twice during the course of this year. The initial targeted audience for those events was families of African American students, and that was in direct response to the graduation rates and dropout rates of our African American students, which were disproportionate to their peers who are not students of color. So the information that we gathered from those community forums included information concerns from families of African American students, but we also received some input from families of students with disabilities and some concerns related to the achievement of our Pacific Islander students. And the information that we gathered from those community forums, all of that information was then forwarded to the District Equity Committee, and the District Equity Committee is now in process of wrestling with those and determining what sort of response needs to come out of that. So, the board, as far as receiving community engagement, events like this, a budget committee provides opportunity for community members to come forward. I do think that there may come a time where we discuss alternative options, where we can have different kinds of opportunities to get parent and community voice. We haven't moved in that direction yet, but I think, again, that's the part of equity being a process and continuing to dialogue and engage in how can we do our best efforts to ensure that everyone's voice has an opportunity to be heard. So those are the two documents and how they currently work. Let's talk about how the equity lens and the equity policy were applied to budgeting. There are just a few examples. We could provide you many more, but these are some of the big ones. So the first bullet refers to the manner in which FTE is allocated out to schools, and so how are staffing assignments made within schools. And so there's a preliminary ratio that is calculated, and then schools that meet the needs of children in poverty, and if 70% of their student population is in poverty, there is an adjustment made and additional funds are allocated to those schools in the form of additional FTE. And in addition, Title I funds, which are federal funds, are also allocated on a per pupil basis to every school that has 43% of their students in poverty or higher. The elementary math adoption I referred to briefly, but again, one of the priorities in that adoption was the availability of Spanish resources, and so we're confident that that was a good choice for us and are looking forward to implementing those materials in both our Lit Squared and our dual language classrooms. Enrollment of English language students is shifting. So I believe that there were some specific questions addressing the reduction of classified staff for bilingual instructional assistants at the elementary level. And I want to be clear that the reduction of staff at the elementary level was really a reallocation of bilingual staff to the secondary level. So let me frame the issue for you. We have about 1,000 fewer English language learners at the elementary level, and we have about 225 more English language learners at the secondary level. So the adjustment in order to meet the needs of students was a reduction of 12.94 FTE at the elementary level of classified staff, and the addition of 1.9 FTE licensed staff at the secondary level. The difference in classified staff versus licensed staff is the manner in which the programs are run at different levels. So the licensed staff are required at the secondary level because students are actually enrolled in a period of English language development at both the middle school or the high school. And so those require licensed teachers. The reductions at the elementary level are not 12 or almost 13 full-time positions. The 12.94 FTE is a compilation of multiple employees who are being reduced by an hour or an hour and a half. And it's the hope and the intent that in many of those cases, the building principal may be able to backfill some of those lost hours with other funding sources. I don't have the details on how many times that's actually able to occur, but it was our hope in reducing staff by a little bit here and there that we could maintain the integrity of the programs and that there could be some opportunity for principals to identify other funds to backfill those reductions. All right, continued investments in the Office of Behavioral Learning. Again, this is an area where traditionally, maybe 5 years ago, certainly 10 years ago, this sort of injection of funds was not part of a traditional school budget to the level and the extent that it is today. And that's a great example of how equity drives where the money flows, and that the Office of Behavioral Learning was designed and implemented in response to a very specific need. And the needs of our students who are dealing with trauma have stretched our teachers. You've heard much of this, but the Office of Behavioral Learning and the resources that are dedicated to that office are designed to assist students who have mental health needs or absenteeism needs or other behavioral issues. And finally, we have contracts with external educational agencies, specifically edX. EdExcellence is one of those, and EdExcellence provides professional learning for our Title I schools. They do some work with all of our schools, but the majority of their contract is utilizing federal funds to identify coaching supports for high leverage instructional strategies in our Title I schools. And that allocation was made, again, on a very purposeful manner, making sure that we have the best instruction in front of our most neediest kids. Similarly, Avid provides access to rigorous courses for students who may not have considered themselves college-bound, who may not have considered themselves prepared for a rigorous course in high school. I won't go into any detail about Avid in my presentation because you will get that in a different presentation. The back side of your sheet provides you some details specifically on OSEAA, so the Office of Student Equity, Access, and Advancement. You'll see the dollar figures associated with the general fund expenses that are allocated for OSEAA. Just as a note, the African American Youth Leadership Conference has been a long-time expense. That is not a new addition simply because of the Office of Student Equity, Access, and Advancement. Typically, those funds actually came out of the Executive Administration budget and have been now shifted to the appropriate place in OSEA. And you'll see a summary list of the kinds of activities and current work of OSEAA. Primary responsibilities, obviously, with the District Equity Committee and the Student Equity Committee. For future notice, if you are ever looking for a place to visit on a Thursday afternoon once a month, the students who gather for the Student Equity Committee are a dynamic bunch, social justice minded. They ask very difficult questions, and it has been a pleasure to be with them. So that's been a great use of funds. And you'll notice that one of the dollar expenditures up top is to ensure that all of those students have transportation to be able to attend to those meetings. So we purchased bus passes for any of those students on the Equity Committee who did not have their own transportation or for their families who could not provide transportation. And that really helped making sure that we had regular attendance from those students. You'll note we did some pre-K equity work. That was in cooperation with Stephanie Wetzel and Sophia Durst in our early childhood education programs. I spoke earlier of the community forums. The community resource specialist is the classified position within OSEAA, and that position, the gentleman in that position worked with over 75 students. Again, our initial targeting population was African American students at risk of not graduating. That looked like students with credit deficiencies, students with attendance issues, students that were potential dropouts that were beginning to demonstrate risk factors. And so Darnell's work when he was in that position was to develop plans, individual plans for each student. He would monitor those plans for success and meet with students weekly, and then marshal resources and network community agencies or whatever kinds of resources were necessary for kids. Finally, some professional learning, classified pathways. That's the language that we use for our professional development opportunities for our classified staff, and we offered several opportunities specifically targeting culturally responsive teaching and educational equity. We also provided some leadership training. I spoke of those topics earlier. There were multiple schools that requested some staff meeting trainings or some short staff developments, schools that wanted some conversations or some support in dealing with implicit bias or other topics that are stemming out of educational equity, and several instances in which there were racially charged or racially targeted disciplinary actions where principals and our behavior specialists and our counselors called on the Office of Student Equity, Access, and Advancement to come in and counsel and partner through some conversations. So lots and lots of information. That was a lot of me talking, but hopefully that provided some clarity. Do you have any questions?
Mark?
Thank you for this briefing and introduction to the process, because this is the first budget process that we've had where the equity lens policy was in place before the budget work even began. And so I'm referencing the part of the board policy that says, I guess it's the third bullet, changes in resource allocation, design, and implementation of policies and programs will be considered in light of equitable outcomes. Are there examples of things that came out of your meetings where a change was not made but was considered?
That's a great question. The Office of Behavioral Learning has continued to be a place where we have had multiple aspects of discussion, and because it's new, we're still not sure we're getting all of those pieces right. So there have been conversations about embedding behavior cadre and how many supports are really necessary. So there were lots of conversations about how do you balance potential reductions based upon limited fiscal resources with continuing and perhaps escalating needs of students. That's the first instance that comes to mind where we spent quite a bit of time talking around what student needs would really push us to do, and yet what perhaps we weren't able to address due to fiscal resources limitations, or we felt a pull in another area and we just couldn't justify eliminating something in order to push resources there.
Okay, thank you.
Kathleen?
With regards to the OSEAA, this appears to be like a test of change. Is that a correct analysis? So when we're doing test of change, then we look at outcome metrics to gauge our success or if we're off target. What sort of outcome metrics are we planning to follow?
So the short-term outcome metrics that we have are mostly associated with the work that Darnell completed in his role as community resource specialist. And so Darnell is no longer with us. We celebrate the fact that he has left the classified ranks and is now in a licensed teaching position that was vacated partially through the school year. So we celebrate the fact that he's making some professional growth, but that also means that we are now without a community resource specialist. Our short-term metrics in that instance would be of the 75 students that had the intense relationship and mentoring and coaching with Darnell, how many of those were we able to successfully either get back on track all the way, or at least generate a feasible, reachable plan that would allow those kids to see with step A, step B, step B. That might be summer school credit recovery, that might be online credit recovery, whatever the different plan might be. That's the fastest metric that we have that would be able to provide us an indication of, is this even working? Longer term metrics are a lot more difficult to quantify. So when you want to look at things like, do we have a broader, better understanding of what it means to be an equitable organization? And do we do a better job of identifying and eliminating systemic barriers to students for access, to families for access? We do not yet have final definition on what those metrics will look like, knowing that that's such a long-term process. And so that really has been part of our continued dialogue, specifically my continued dialogue as supervising OSEA, in that how will I know when we have begun to reach some of those benchmarks and have begun to move the dial on what we believe and how we behave within educational equity.
Jesse? Or sorry, Levy. My apologies.
No worries. So I have two questions. Are the culturally responsive and equity trainings, are those optional for staff or required or encouraged?
Both. So our middle school director, Matt Biondi, did an excellent job of putting out a call and an expectation that his middle school staff would indeed participate in training directly correlated with culturally responsive teaching. And so that was an opportunity that was provided to the teachers with the expectation that, yes, you will participate. Classified pathways for culturally responsive teaching are an opt-in. Classified staff can choose to participate in those. School-based culturally responsive trainings, staff meetings, or short half-day trainings are not optional if you happen to be in that school, but optional by the sense in that the building principal elected to bring that in. So it's still kind of a mixture of both, Levy.
So one follow-up, so is there a state requirement for a certain number of equity training?
There's not. Professional development is not something that's particularly well regulated by the state, and that's not a bad thing. I think being responsive to the needs that are demonstrated with either student achievement scores or perception data that we can receive from staff, trying to analyze what do we believe, what are our values for education, and what are our student needs demonstrating. We are committed to continuing to provide culturally responsive teaching, and I would love to get to the place where we can set up and establish the expectation that our high school teams participate and our elementary teams participate. We're just not there yet.
Okay. My second question was about the equity lens. I might have missed it, but the questions on the back, are they being used? And if they are, is it possible to share an example for those of us who are not board members?
Sure. So we have not utilized this as a checklist per se. So we're in a formal manner. We haven't consistently walked ourselves through every question on this document saying, yes, we did that, yes, we did that, but rather have been sort of holistically ensuring, have community members been involved? What are the barriers to outcomes? And addressing the topics embedded within this. So if you're asking, do I have a written copy of this with a sign off for every decision we've made? No, absolutely not. And I don't think we want to head in that direction. But are these the questions, and are these the ideas that we consistently come back and frame when we're in discussion and dialogue? Yeah.
I have a question about the Office of Student Equity, Access, and Advancement. Do they? Because I love everything that you said, and in fact, I think it's a great thing that we have this, just because it shows that we're addressing the need, and also shows the public that, hey, we're able to actually get this done and it's achievable. But I was wondering, are they, besides things about like access and equity of race, do they also work with other things such as kids with incarcerated parents or people way below the poverty line, things like that?
So one of the initial trainings that the OSEAA provided was understanding poverty, some components of generational poverty, how does the manner in which you're raised and the either adverse childhood experiences that you encounter or just the environment and the kinds of things that you were exposed to as a child, how do those impact you as an adult? And we actually took our entire leadership team through an activity where we asked them to calculate if you've encountered this experience, and begin to ask them to think about how their own personal past has impacted them as adults. And then we actually conducted that same activity with students across the district in some of our middle schools, and then we're able to post comparative data. So to be able to say to our leadership, look at where you fall on this spectrum of experiences or privilege, and let's compare that to the students that we encounter every day. And so we are trying to broaden the conversation beyond race. Race is I don't want to say easy place to jump in, but it's a very visual place to jump in. There are some very difficult conversations that have to occur around race, but we do believe the poverty conversation has been critically important as well.
Good.
Yeah, this is off topic just a little bit, but I was reminded when I saw your bus passes for students. Is there any dialogue going on between the district and the transit organization regarding reinstating the free bus passes for high school students? Because this affects kids being able to get the SATs and
Yeah,
and
right,
everything
right,
else. So
right.
I was just wondering, we had that a few years ago. I was wondering if
Clearly, there are
any-
experts in this room more knowledgeable than I am.
I didn't mean to get us off topic, but that just reminded me.
Right.
Sure. So to answer your question, those bus passes were supported by the Business Energy Tax Credit program that no longer supports those riders, the ridership there. Although we did take advantage of it as a district, as many others did throughout the state. But there is legislation that just passed that allows for bus passes to be used in districts, which is great because right now that's an issue with ODE and having approved vehicles to move students. And so we're heading in the right direction with that. We're just, our transportation director has been involved throughout the legislative process and is on the implementation committee, so we can bring back more information.
And if there's anything the board can do to help with that, I'm sure that there'd be support on that.
Thank you.
At least I would be.
We'll take two more questions if that's okay, because we want to keep us moving. Kathy, go ahead.
So I'm concerned on the equity lens, and I really have been for quite a while. So in the district, we have an extreme amount of kids that have suffered from trauma. And when I read the list that says what we have done, I don't find those kids on there.
So let me clarify that there has been an inordinate amount of effort placed into responding to students that are living in trauma or coming out of trauma. But the majority of that work hasn't necessarily come out of the Equity Office, certainly has not come out of the Office of Student Equity Access and Advancement, nearly to the extent that it has come out of the Office of Behavioral Learning. So I think there would be better people that could respond to all of the responses that we have been able to provide to students in trauma. Certainly on our radar, absolutely.
Good, and I'd like to sit on our radar that those kids are academically challenged. I mean, that produces our dropout rate, which is unacceptable at this point. But those are kids that have suffered trauma, and I'd like to see them in something besides a behavioral
Right.
pyramid.
Just to plant a flag, if this isn't already on staff's radar, I really appreciate this conversation, and I hope that this becomes a standard part of the superintendent's budget message when it's originally presented, with ever-increasing data and information and examples of what the Equity Lens process looks like in creating the budget. So thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, we're going to make one more adjustment to the agenda because we know folks are here with children, and we so much appreciate that you're here. And we hate that you would have to be here till 9. So we are going to go ahead and take our, again, unfortunate half hour of public comment. We're going to go ahead and do that now. And it's going to be based on those that had signed up on the list. We just don't want you to have to wait until 8:30 or 9 to be able to provide comment. But because we do need to get through the reports this evening and the additional information that's going to be provided to us from staff, we are still going to have to limit public comment to a half hour. But we're going to go ahead and do that now.
That helps a little.
Okay.
Joan?
Yes. Sorry.
Who's the timekeeper? Don't look at me.
Are you volunteering?
No.
You should volunteer.
I'll be the timekeeper.
Okay. We have a volunteer.
Do you want the little doodad?
3 minutes.
Okay, and so what we'll do is we will call names of those that have signed up, and it will be limited to 3 minutes. And when you come up, we do ask that you state your address and the topic. We do need that for public records. So first up on the sign-up sheet is Nancy Gamano. And I apologize for mispronouncing probably most names. So thank you.
Guys hear me? Hello, good evening. I am Yaira Canchola. I reside at 700 Keizer, Pierce Drive, Keizer, Oregon, sorry. And I'll be interpreting tonight.
Okay,
This is Nancy. What I'll do, she'll go ahead and give her testimony, and then I'll go ahead
Okay.
and read.
Buenas noches, presidente, superintendente y miembros del Comité de Presupuestos. Mi nombre es Nancy Gamino y vivo en el noreste de Keizer. Tengo 3 niños, uno de 14 años, 10 y 3 años, que asisten a la escuela Güero y Claggett Creek. Soy madre de niños bilingües. Una de las preocupaciones que yo tengo como madre es el recorte de 12.94 FTE, que son 517 horas por semana de asistentes de instrucciones bilingües en las escuelas primarias. Debido a que las nuevas pautas estatales y federales se han vuelto más estrictas para que estudiantes a nivel de jardín de infantes califiquen para ingresar al programa de ELD. Aunque yo y miles de padres estamos contentos con el progreso de que agregaron a 4º y 5º grado a los programas bilingües en muchas escuelas, estoy segura de que saben que los nuevos estudiantes que no califican se retrasarán rápidamente sin apoyos adicionales. Sin duda, aún enfrentan un déficit en el desarrollo del lenguaje. Espero que puedan encontrar soluciones favorables para el éxito de nuestros hijos. Gracias.
Thank you. Con permiso. Good evening, Chairman, Superintendent, Budget Committee members. My name is Nancy Gamino, and I live in the northeast of Keizer. I have 3 children, 14 and 10, and a 3-year-old, who attend Waddell, and Claggett Creek. I am a parent of bilingual children. One of the concerns I have as a mother is the 12.94 FTE cut, the 517 hours per week of bilingual instructional aides in elementary schools. Due to the new state-federal guidelines, the ELD qualifications at the kindergarten level have become stricter. Although I and thousands of parents are very happy with the progress, of adding 4th and 5th grade to the bilingual programs at many schools, I am sure there are new students who do not qualify and will be set back and will not have that additional support. Without a doubt, they will face a deficit in language development. I hope you can find favorable solutions for the success of our children. Thank you. I will also interpret for the next following presenters. Thank you.
And I'm letting it go beyond the 3 minutes
great.
for the interpretation.
That's
Thank you.
wonderful, thank you. Okay, Cecilia? Again, if you could provide the address and the topic. Thank you.
My address.
Thank you.
Good evening again. This is Yaira Canchola. I live in 700 Pierce Drive North, Keizer, Oregon, and I'll be interpreting for Cecilia.
Thank you.
Buenas noches, presidente, superintendente y miembros del Comité de Presupuesto. Mi nombre es Cecilia Valencia y vivo en el 1930 de Hampton Line, espacio 1 en Salem. Tengo 2 niños de 7 y 3 años y uno asiste a la escuela Chávez.
Lo que vamos a hacer es leerlo todo y lo puedo leer después. Todo.
Soy padre de unos niños bilingües. Tengo entendido que en este año hay muchos menos niños bilingües en las escuelas y que ustedes tuvieron que recortar las horas para asistentes de maestros, pero me preocupan nuestros niños latinos que no califican para servicios de idiomas. Como voluntaria de la Coalición para la Igualdad de Salem-Keizer, conozco a muchos padres cuyos hijos tienen problemas en la escuela por los idiomas. Esto es porque en nuestras familias no contamos con libros ni con material que nos ayuden en la educación de nuestros hijos. Afortunadamente, yo soy una madre que he recibido programas de la coalición en mi idioma, lo cual me ha enseñado y me ha ayudado en el involucramiento y apoyo en la educación de mis hijos. Me he dado cuenta de la importancia de las escuelas bilingües que ofrecen programas para los padres. Personalmente, yo considero que debe de haber un presupuesto para estas escuelas. Espero que puedan encontrar con un presupuesto destinado para esas escuelas. Gracias.
Good evening, Chairman, Superintendent, and Budget Committee members. My name is Cecilia Valencia, and I live in 1930 Hamden Lane, Space 1, Northeast Salem. I have 2 children at ages 7 and 3. One attends Chavez School. I am a parent of bilingual children. I understand that there are fewer children in the bilingual programs this year, and that the teacher assistant hours have been cut. But I am concerned about our Latino children who do not qualify for the bilingual services. As a volunteer at the Salem-Keizer Coalition for Equality, I know many parents whose children have problems in schools with the language barriers. This is due to families that have no books or materials to help them in the education of their children. Fortunately, I am a parent who has benefited from these programs that have been provided from the coalition in my language, which has taught me and helped me in the involvement and support in the education of my children. I am aware of the importance of bilingual schools that offer programs that encourage parent involvement. Personally, I consider a budget for these type of school programs is extremely necessary. I hope you can find solutions for all of this. The success of our students depend on it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So next up, we have Angelica Flores.
Good evening. This is Yaira Canchola. I'm at 700 Pierce Drive, Keizer, Oregon, and I'll be interpreting for Rosa Angelica.
Buenas noches, presidente, superintendente y miembros del Comité del Presupuesto. Mi nombre es Rosa Angélica Flores y vivo al sureste de Salem. Tengo 2 niños de 15 años y 12 años que asisten a South Salem High School y Leslie Middle School. Me preocupan los recortes en la capacitación de docentes de $50,000. Habrá incluso más profesores de inglés que tienen estudiantes latinos que están rezagados y necesitan aprender métodos de instrucción protegidos. También necesitan aprender competencia cultural y ser culturalmente receptivos para que los estudiantes sean más felices en las escuelas y se comporten mejor. Deseo que puedan encontrar soluciones para todo esto por el éxito de nuestros estudiantes. Es importante. Muchas gracias.
Good evening, Chairman, Superintendents, and Budget Committee members. My name is Rosa Angelica. I live in Southeast. I have 2 children, ages 15 and 12, who attend South Salem High School and Leslie Middle School. I am worried about cuts in teacher training of the $50,000. There will be even more English teachers who have Latino students who are lagging behind and have the need to learn the protected instructional methods. They also need to learn cultural competence and be culturally receptive so that students are happier in school and behave better. I hope you find solutions for all these because the success of our students is important. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next up, Yadira Juarez.
Hi, good evening, Chair, Superintendent, and Budget Committee's members. My name is Yadira Juarez, and I live in Northeast Salem. I have 3 children, and 18, 16, and 9-year-old, who attended to Grand Elementary and South High School. I want to thank you for your hard work and for your collaboration with us for the past 4 years. It has meant a lot to me. I'm very worried that you cut 12.94 FTE of bilingual instructional assistants in elementary schools. I understand that there was a decrease in the number of the students that qualify for English language development programs, but even the hundreds did not qualify, they will still need extra help because our families still have a low vocabulary level. I understand that many children will still be able to attend bilingual or dual language programs if their parents want them to keep their home language, but many of them will still need extra help even they don't qualify. I'm assuming that they didn't qualify because we have more children from our second generation who are speaking English and Spanish at home. I hope you will be able to find a solution to make sure those children who didn't qualify will get the instruction and attention they need to be successful in school. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Ana Palazzo.
Hi, good evening. My name is Anna Olivia Palazzo Angulo, and I reside at 3644 31st Avenue Northeast. My 4th child is a junior at North High, and I want to thank you for your hard work in putting together this budget. I see careful attention to the equity lens while you're making these decisions to the best of your ability, and it's noticeable, and I really appreciate it. And I understand the cuts and additions that you're making. As far as I can tell anyway, it's complicated sometimes. But I do appreciate the additions that you've got to address the traumatic behavior problems that we are having at our schools in the past 2 years. Of course, we now have more children than ever before with significant behavioral health issues, and we're charged with making sure they grow into successful, self-sufficient members of society. In partnership with their parents and health providers, we recognize that this is a huge, overwhelming responsibility and is adding significantly to the stress of our teachers. Which brings me to one of the areas of budget reductions I am concerned about, the $50,000 cut from the teacher's professional development budget. I don't know exactly what areas of the development budget that this cut is coming from, but I do hope very much that it doesn't signal a slowdown of the goals that we have set for every teacher and staff member to be trained in equity and cultural responsiveness, as well as the teachers need help with stress and with behavior, like using PBIS. I've known that you have to do a lot of training with that. But I do feel that we're years behind in the training of all staff members in equity and cultural responsiveness. I always think of North Clackamas School District when we worked up there several years ago. They made it a goal and trained the 2,000 staff members over 4 years, which is like 500 per year. And we're not going that fast. And it bothers me a lot that we are still not going that fast at all. So it's going to take a number of years if we don't go faster, because we have 48 100 employees, and I know a number of them have been trained, but and then as you heard from some of the parents, the concern about the hours of instructional assistance that are being cut in the elementary schools, and I understand the decrease in the numbers of kids that are qualifying for the ELD. I know that it's directly proportionate to the numbers of the money, that you're getting less money for each kid that doesn't qualify, so there is a loss of 1,000. And the hours cut are directly proportional, so there's no loss per currently enrolled or qualifying kid. But we feel that I feel that the second generation, the children that are not qualifying are still going to have language problems because I think the fact that they don't qualify, is that mine? Better not. That's my 3 minute. I was like, that better not be mine.
Sorry, we were going to try to be
But
more
yeah,
subtle.
so I just feel like teachers will be very hard pressed, and I understand the hope that each school will find the funds to hopefully keep that much or more assistance than they have, in proportion. It's just that I wish that it was really across the board, because I know that in some places it won't happen, and teachers are already so stressed. Even though the kids don't qualify, I think they're still going to need extra assistance. So thank you very much.
Thank you. So next, Rita Glass.
I've turned the volume down to be a little more subtle now. I know.
Good evening, Chair Blasi, Vice Chair Herrera Lopez, Superintendent Perry, members of the school board, and members of the budget committee. My name is Rita Glass, and I reside at 4384 Falcon View Way, Northeast Salem, 97305. As the president of ASCII-ESP, I am speaking to you tonight on behalf of our elementary office managers, school office specialists, and our elementary students to ask that you review the proposed budget for 2018-19 school year, to please reinstate the school-based health assistant positions for our elementary schools that were eliminated in 2011. There currently are school-based health assistants at the middle school and high school level. This is a classified ESP position, not a licensed position. As you are aware, our schools are seeing an increase in the number of students who require medications and medical procedures and protocols to be administered. During the recent superintendent's budget message, we heard since 2011, there has been a 300% increase in students on 504 IEPs, which are medically related, and an increase in the number of students with type 1 diabetes. Our elementary schools have experienced a dramatic daily increase in student visits to the office for health room-related incidents, both medical and non-medical. Not only do our elementary office staff attend to the injured, calm the angry, provide medications on time with prescribed dosage to the correct student, and having to enter every incident into the district's electronic health room log while assisting and communicating with staff, parents in person and by phone, and site administration to meet their needs and requests, and other duties such as payroll, manage budgets, attendance, etc. Our elementary office staff are also now being expected to assist staff with students experiencing challenging behaviors and toileting protocols. Between September 2017 and April 2018, there were a total of 64,870 entries made on the health room log by our elementary office staff. My ask of you tonight is, as the district's budget committee and school board members, on behalf of our elementary students, in order to adequately serve their needs, it is critical that our district reinstate the school-based health assistant positions with the appropriate FTE to meet the needs of each elementary school. I thank you for your time and consideration of reinstating the school-based health assistants in our elementary schools. And also just to talk briefly about the 12.94 ELL special programs IA2s that are being eliminated. Well, I'll come back next week and talk to you about that.
That, I put
Thank you.
I should not be in charge of this.
Okay, thank you. I'll be
It
back
is.
on the
Thank you.
15th.
Thank you, Rita.
It works better than the light, I guess. Thank you, Rita.
So next up, we have Anna Gambe, and I'm sorry, I can't quite read the writing. I'm sure that's not quite correct.
Good evening. My name is Anaí Garibay. I reside at 621 Wayne Drive North, and I live in Keizer. And I'm currently an office manager at Grant Community School. I've been there for 3 years, and I'm here to talk to you about the school-based health assistance that we really, really need at the elementary school, at the elementary level. My colleagues and I ask that you please review this as you're going through the proposed budget for 2018-19. And I want to just share with you a little experience that I've had, just one of many. So when I first came on board, my mindset was I'm here to support the students, I'm here to support the teachers. But little did I know that I was going to be facing a large medical responsibility within the first year, which was above and beyond CPR and first aid. The first year I was there, I met a little boy, kindergartner, and he had a complicated condition. It was spina bifida. So in the midst of all that we do at the elementary level, I found myself needing to be medically trained to assist this little boy with a bladder relieving procedure, which is very complicated. This little boy's needs was a team effort, just to say the least. We needed the one-on-one IA trained, myself, the principal, and one additional person. Normally, in the health room tasks are divided in our school by the office specialist and also the office managers, which can also put a strain on our workload and can leave room for error, especially in this type of situation. This student required to be cathed twice a day, and the process was anything but easy. We couldn't rush it. It takes about 20 minutes each time. And we also have to keep in mind that this meant taking into consideration his comfort level, this was a very personal procedure. So imagine the amount of concentration that it requires to relieve this little guy's bladder. And at the same time, imagine that your phone is ringing at your desk. Also, that another student needs an ice pack, one of our magical ice packs that fixes everything. And then you have a classroom buzzing at the office that needs help for behavior. You can only imagine the type of error or room for error that creates. And the margin for error isn't because we lack training. It's because it's due of the amount of tasks that are all happening at once. So although we do get the opportunity to build a trusting relationship with our students as they come in through the health room, I sincerely feel that we leave other important tasks unattended constantly. And if we focus on our daily work, we run the risk of shorting our students of what they are equitably entitled to, which is quality care while being at school. I feel that if we had the additional support at the elementary levels again, we would be able to give that to our students, consistent attention from the same experienced, medically trained staff member. And I think about this as a new mom, as an aunt to 3 kiddos already in the district. And although I very much appreciate what those schools already do for them, I also feel that our students deserve a better experience when they are not feeling well at school. Someone that can consistently show them that they care, and somebody that will tell them that they're going to be okay. And that's going to have the time to follow through with that parent, whether it be a concussion, please watch out for these symptoms, or whatever the situation needs. So as of right now, I thank you for your time. I hope that you can consider this as something important for our elementary schools, and we can provide all of our students with equal access to our school-based health assistance. Thank you.
Okay. Next up, and I believe we just have the first name, Yolanda.
Good evening, Budget Committee, Superintendent Perry, Chair Blasi, Vice Chair Herrera Lopez, and members of the School Board and Budget Committee. My name is Yolanda Mena, and I reside at 613 Cater Drive, Northeast in Keizer. As an office manager, I am speaking to you tonight on behalf of our elementary managers, school office specialists, and elementary students to ask that the district reviews the proposed budget for adoption for the 2018-19 school year to please reinstate the school-based health assistant position for our elementary schools that were eliminated in 2011. I was hired 16 years ago, and one of my positions was
a school-based health assistant. So I know how important that position can be to help relieve the rest of the staff so that we can perform to our best and fullest potential. I wanted to share an experience that obviously I was planning to say something different tonight, but I ran into something different these last 2 days. Yesterday, we had 14 jobs at my school in ASOP. 5 of them were unfilled, and 1 of them was my SOS, leaving me to myself for 610 students. That includes everything on the daily basis, helping parents, helping phones, assisting with behavior, blowouts, and everyone else that needs assistance in the health room. We have a diabetic at Scott Elementary that needs our fullest attention to that we make sure that we keep our eyes on him at all times, or else he will punch in different numbers, give himself different insulin, and we can allow that to happen as he is in our care. So this is very important for us that we multitask on a daily basis. That's why we do what we do. However, I am finding myself leaving 5:30, 6:30 every night instead of 4:30 because I can't perform my job to the fullest as I would like. And just knowing the perfectionist that I am going to make sure that I take everything that I have not finished home. I will be with my family as a person in the living room or in my desk, but I will not be to their fullest potential either. So that leaves me shorting my family and not just the school. So this is very important for all of us, office managers, school specialists, everyone that works in a school setting, because we want to make sure that we are here for our community, our students, our parents, and give 100% of ourselves. So thank you for your time and consideration, and request that you reinstate school-based health assistants to our elementary schools.
So next up, we have Megan Steele, and then I think we'll have time for one more after that.
Good evening, Budget Committee, Superintendent Perry, Chair Blasi, Vice Chair Herrera-Lopez, and members of the School Board and Budget Committee. My name is Megan Steele, and I reside at 5154 Cortlandt Street in Keizer. Not too long ago, I received a call from a frantic mother informing me that Dad, who is to have no contact with the child, told her he was on the way to school to pick the child up. She told me she's racing and she's on her way to the school to hopefully get there before Dad. Before I'd even hung up the phone, I had a kindergartner come in with a severe bloody nose like I've never seen, and I have seen a lot of bloody noses. This kinder was bleeding so much, she was starting to show signs of passing out. I needed to call the nurse helpline, I needed to call her guardian, and I was getting a sinking suspicion I was going to need to call 911 as well. My office manager was at lunch, my principal was somewhere else in the building, and I was the only office personnel in the office at the time. I was completely torn as I needed to be in the back with this kindergartner during a medical emergency, and I needed to be in the front for a custody emergency, and there was just no way I could be in both places with the necessary attention to detail at one time. It was one of many scary moments I have experienced in the office, and I want to make sure all kids are safe, but I'm only one person. I would like to thank you for allowing me to address my concerns regarding the need for a staff member who is specifically trained to treat the medical needs of our students and who does not already have a full-time position in the office. Specifically, the need for health assistants to be reinstated in the elementary school offices. On top of the clerical piece of our job as school office specialists, we are responsible for monitoring who comes through the front door. We connect faces with names of those with restraining orders and sticky custody issues, and others who should not have access to students, as well as various other visitors not connected with students, such as district employees, DHS, contractors, etc. In addition, we field numerous phone calls, many of which are long in nature and take a lot of time and problem solving. To add to these busy comings and goings throughout the day, we are also responsible for handling the medical needs and emergencies of each student in the building. At Gubser, where I work, to date, we have assisted students with over 900 stomach aches, over 1,500 cold and flu symptoms, over 1,200 ice pack needs, to name a few. We also dispense medications that are a controlled substance to 13 students daily at specific times throughout the day. I've been in the health room monitoring a student with a severe concussion, stepped away to peek to the front of my desk, only to find a large group of parents waiting at my desk that I did not let into the building. This is a common occurrence where parents who are leaving will hold the door open for parents, we hope, who are coming in. and they are not screened by office personnel if no one's at the front. We implore you to provide funds in the budget and reinstate health assistance in the elementary school. Thank you for your time and consideration of our request.
So I think we have time for one more, and I am going to ask, because the folks next up on the list are usually here at our meetings, and I'm assuming we'll be here next week as well. I wanted to ask if there's anyone here to speak to the Budget Committee that's here with children, parents with children that have not had an opportunity to speak yet.
I have some waiting to go to bed.
Okay. McCrae, I see you're on the list. Would that be okay with others? If we, Mindy, would that be okay?
I have a member here who actually can use an hour.
Oh, okay. Okay, we will do both. We will make both happen. Yeah. So McCrae, do you want to go ahead and come up, and then we'll, or either one of you. Thank you. We'll do both.
Hello, my name is McCrae Carmichael. I live at 480 Luther Street in Salem. Thank you, members of the school board and school district, for the opportunity to speak about the proposed Salem School District budget for 2018 and 19. I and several parents from McKinley Elementary School are here to address you, and I speak on behalf of all of us that are here in the audience. I'm a parent of 3 children, 2 of whom are currently students at McKinley Elementary, 1st and 5th grade, and 1 who is a freshman at South. I have been a parent at McKinley for over a decade now with my 3 children. I am privileged to volunteer almost every day at McKinley, mostly in my daughter's 1st grade classroom. I do so because my daughter's classroom should have a full-time IA, as should the other class also. As a regular volunteer, I'm in a position to observe what takes place in the EGC and special education classrooms on a nearly daily basis. For several years, McKinley has hosted special education program Life Skills Classrooms. It's probably been 5 to 6 years now. Life Skills Classrooms have a significant and growing physical presence at McKinley. At the beginning of this current school year, 1 classroom was designated as an EGC classification. This closed classroom has 5 to 10 students with 1 lead teacher and 1 or more student teachers to each student. This classroom is located at the end of the 1st grade corridor of the building. Sensory tools are located in and outside the classroom and are at various locations around the building as assists for students with special needs. Students in these classrooms are transported to McKinley from around the district. I understand that the district is limited for space, which is why McKinley is one of several schools selected as a host for this classroom. I've heard that almost half of Salem-Keizer elementary schools host some sort of classroom managed by the Office of Behavioral Learning. However, I do not agree with the location of the EGC classroom at McKinley for these reasons. The location of the EGC classroom at McKinley exposes other students to obscene language and behavior that is volatile and sometimes violent. Students from the EGC classroom can be heard and seen from the library and the LOC and the 1st grade classrooms on a daily basis. This disrupts what would be safe and calm academic environment for everyone along that hallway and corridor. It is a weekly, if not daily, event for 1st grade students to witness EGC staff containing the behavior of EGC students. While EGC staff are doing what is appropriate to calm these students, there is no reason other students should witness this daily. It only results in emotional distress for the young learners. Additionally, McKinley is coping with its own needs for space to accommodate our students' population academics needs. In the 10 years, as I'm sure you all are aware, McKinley has changed a lot, and McKinley needs the resources, in my opinion, that are going to, just spatially, sorry, stay on task. We have reading specialists and other support staff using small corners and closets of the school to assist students from all grades. The EGC classroom is using the space that students within the boundaries of McKinley could utilize for learning. I'm glad to see the proposed budget allocating more resources to the special education program and to the Office of Behavioral Learning. I also agree that putting more resources and adjusting staff compensation are good choices. The teachers and staff are working in extremely challenging situations and physical environments that deserve that. I ask this district allocate funds to create safe physical locations for these EGC programs. If the EGC classrooms are to be placed around the district, then I encourage comprehensive assessments of these classrooms' location to ensure their best possible placement. As it is now, the current placement of the EGC classroom at McKinley is a disservice to all students, teachers, and the administrator of the school. I know that better decisions can be made at McKinley specifically and for schools across the district. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. And our last testimony.
Hi, my name is Ruth Ames. I live at 2625 Portland Street in Eugene, Oregon. And I want to thank you for allowing me to speak and also for excusing my misunderstanding earlier. So thank you so much for allowing me to address you, Budget Chair Blasi, Vice Chair Herrera Lopez, Superintendent Perry, and members of the Budget Committee. I work at Robert Structured Learning Center, which is part of the Alt Ed program in Salem-Keizer School District. I teach math and social studies to middle school students that have been expelled. I'm also the Alt Ed Director for the SKEA Board of Directors and one of the early career fellows from the early career leadership group that we had a grant to support last year. I'm here to impress upon you the importance of the counseling services for our students, in particular drug and alcohol counseling for our secondary schools. I serve students that haven't been successful in the typical school system, but there are students like my students at every single school. Students cannot learn when they do not feel safe, secure, and supported. Students throughout our district deal with trauma, violence, incarcerated family members, substance abuse, both of their own and people around them, mental illness, anxiety, and a multitude of other life challenges that can inhibit their learning. Schools provide a safe, consistent environment and access to adults that students can rely on even when other elements in their life might be chaotic. Including the drug and alcohol counselors in our school can provide interventions for students that are struggling with substance abuse and that otherwise not have any access to those sorts of services. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of these professionals being inside our learning communities. Relationship is key to students feeling safe and supported. They are key to learning. They are key to growth. Relationship is the center of all of it, and counselors that are inside the building over time, every day, greeting students when they walk in, having lunch with students in the cafeteria, being there if a kid just needs to talk. That is what allows those counselors to be able to make an influence and a difference in students' lives. The drug and alcohol counselors that we might contract from an outside service may be able to provide quality drug and alcohol counseling services, but they cannot develop and build relationships with our students in the same way that a person who is a member of our staff can do. In addition, at Roberts, we, by design, have extremely small class sizes, with a small number of students for each adult. I have watched troubled students that have failed every single class since 6th grade, who have had referral after referral after referral turn into high-quality workers, achieving A's and B's in my class, being upstanding citizens who are leaders in their community because of the attention, because of the small class sizes, because somebody is taking the time to notice them and isn't just letting them be at the back of the class and get ignored, isn't just kicking them out of the class when they use a swear word, isn't just kicking them out of class when they can't keep their mouth shut. By that attention, through those small class sizes, those students are being developed into learners who can go on to succeed, can go on to graduate, or find another path to successful career, GEDs, and other types of services that our district provides for students to find success in their lives. Students should not need to be expelled to have access to the kind of education that makes them successful. And I hear over and over and over again that that's what these students feel like they need. So thank you so much for your time, and thank you for the accommodation.
Thank you. Of course. Thank you. So you want to go back to the first? Yeah. Okay.
The sustainability power.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to transition back to staff reports that were prepared. So next up.
Yeah, we have Measure 98 and Avid, if
Okay.
you want to keep on going.
Okay, yes. Okay, so we'll do Measure 98 report next.
Good evening, everyone. I will turn your attention to the single-page document
It's printed front and back. It's in your folders regarding the High School Success Fund, which we also have called Measure 98. High School Success is a fund initiated by ballot Measure 98 that you remember voters approved back in November of 2016. Then the legislature approved it during their session last year and released the funds for school districts to start using the money for this academic school year. The measure was intended to provide funding specifically for 3 areas: dropout prevention, career and technical education, and college-level education opportunities. The intention there is for ODE to help us measure success in these areas, especially as we start looking at students' accrual of credits towards graduation in grade 9, increase their graduation rates, and prepare them for college and career. What we've noticed is that ODE has come out with a set of criteria that will be important for us to use as our guidance in using these funds. They want to see that we provide teachers time for collaborating around student data. And specifically, how are they doing as they prepare for high school? How are they doing as they enter into high school? And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute here. We also want to see practices that help reduce absenteeism that we describe as chronic. The definition of that in Oregon is 90% or less is considered chronic absenteeism. 90% attendance or less would be chronic absenteeism. We also want to see that students are getting access to college-level courses, whether that's advanced placement, whether that's international baccalaureate, or dual credit courses, or perhaps an overlay of those. And we'd like to see that schools start building systems that encourage and guarantee higher levels of on-time graduation, which we describe as a 4-year journey for students. They also want to see partnerships with external organizations in the communities. So while we look at all of those requirements, we're blessed to have received a significant resource from the High School Success Fund. This year, that amount has been $5.8 million. Next year's allocation will be 6.1. And so although the full funding of Measure 98 for the district would have given us something closer to $11 million, we're grateful for the 5.8 that we've been able to utilize this year. It's also important to note that the legislature determines the flow rate of these funds every biennium. This is the first time, obviously, that we've had access to these funds. And we're interested and eager in knowing whether they will continue in the next biennium. Our sense of things is that they will, and our Measure 98 whisperers would suggest that we actually might get to see a bit of an increase. So we're hopeful about that, but it is something that is subject to the legislature's decision. You'll see in this report that we've provided you with some data relative to student participation in career and technical education. There are a couple of purposes in doing this. This addresses one of the questions that a member of this committee brought forward in terms of the graduation rate for students who participate in CTE, the graduation rate for students who concentrate in CTE. And the difference there is a participant may have taken 1 semester of a class at one time. A concentrator is someone who successfully completes a full year in a state-approved career and technical education program. And so we've provided you with that information across a 4-year span, and you can see it's fairly compelling what happens for students who become CTE concentrators and their graduation rate. So for this reason, we see CTE as one of those strategies that meets all of the requirements of Measure 98. It is an effective dropout prevention strategy. It does obviously provide career and technical education opportunities for our students, and it also provides access to post-secondary education, especially in the areas of apprenticeships, further education, or even in traditional college pathways. So we've provided a bit of a breakdown of how we have been spending this resource this year. And you'll see that we've been fairly active in the area of dropout prevention. We've wanted to make sure that at all of our comprehensive high schools, we're providing students rising into high school access to the summer transition program. So this is a really cool opportunity for kids to come together, meet high school staff, learn about high school readiness strategies that will help them be prepared for the rigors of high school. Give them some really important reading and math instruction, but also some career post-secondary planning even before they begin their 9th grade. We also have helped to fund part of the position for the Community Resource Specialist position. You heard about earlier in the discussions around equity, the Office of Equity, and our focus on African American students. So this High School Success Fund helped to pay for part of that position. We have also been able to increase connections, which is a really successful program for students who are severely credit deficient. Even by the end of the freshman year, there are students who are so far behind on credits that we worry that they're not going to make it to graduation. And so the Connections program focuses specifically on these students and giving them accelerated opportunities to catch up and be back on pace to graduate. So Connections now focuses on grade 10, grade 11, and grade 12, so that's a good expansion. We've also been able to bring back some of the FTE that we've enjoyed in the past around online instruction, and so that's some expansion that we've done at Roberts High School. Additionally, at each of our comprehensive high schools, we've increased some staffing so that students who need credit recovery at any of their neighborhood high schools will have the ability to come in and have access to that. We've also paid for some assistance with Willamette SD to take a look at how we are doing in our portfolio of alternative education programs, and just ask those basic questions about where are we strong, what are the findings and recommendations that an external organization might be able to provide us with, so that we can continue to find ways to improve what we're offering to our students. And then a small amount of the dropout prevention money has gone toward a partnership that we have with Marion County Youth in the juvenile department. Moving forward, as we look at other things that we have spent part of our budget on, we've been pretty active this year in the development of a better, more reliable and robust early warning system around student data that can be helpful and supportive to our school teams, to our district teams, as we monitor progress in ways that require us to look deeply at data. One of the challenges that we've had with our current data system is that it requires a certain level of skill and time with talented people who understand how to mine for the data. And what we really want is for the data to be so ready and available for folks that where they're spending their time is not going and searching for the data, but they can work in collaboration to analyze the data that's coming right at them. And so we'll be talking a little bit more about how we're looking forward to how we'll use that resource in the coming year. We've also had an opportunity to pilot a new online instruction program that is going to help us replace the one that's aging out. Currently, our system that we've relied on for years, Apex, is showing us that it's not providing the level of access or engagement that encourage students to stick with it and persist and get all the way to completion in the ways that we would like. And so in this pilot of Edgenuity, what we've had an opportunity to look at is deeper student engagement, more access for students who might prefer their instruction to be given to them in their own native language rather than English initially. And so there's been just a tremendous amount of opportunity for us in this pilot to see whether this might be the resource for us going forward. The next area that we've focused on with our High School Success Fund has been to increase career and technical education, not just at CTEC, but certainly there as we've introduced the Phase 3 programs, auto collision repair and drone technology. That's been fantastic as a resource for us, obviously, but it's also very heartening to be able to say that at our comprehensive high schools, we've known about high enrollment programs that have bumped up against our capacity with our staffing, and we've been able to increase the staffing for some of those programs that just have a lot of students and a lot of demand. So that's been a really good utilization of this resource. Also, we've introduced CTE programs at Roberts High School. That's a new development for this year, where we're now able to provide business entrepreneurship and education pathway programs to our students at the Teen Parent Program as well as Structured Learning Center. And then we also have a new startup of environmental science as a CTE program at Sprague High School. The measure initially did not include expenses on 8th graders, but our legislature looked at that and said, we really need to focus on the transition into high school. The revision that was made most recently allows us to start spending up to 15% of this grant on students the minute that they have successfully completed 7th grade. As they rise into the 8th grade, even beginning with that summer, we can utilize a portion of the funds, and that amounts to $875,000. And as you can see, we're doing some things at our middle schools for the rising 7th graders into 8th grade, for college and career readiness, but also some support for the existing CTE programs that are there at the middle schools. In the third area that this fund focuses on, college level education opportunities. Nearly every district that I'm aware of that is accessing this grant is using a portion of it to help provide funding for the Promise activities, and so we're part of the Willamette Promise. That gives students access to college level credit, and we're able to fund teacher stipends, pay for substitutes when teachers need to leave the classroom and go be a part of a PLC with a college professor and their colleagues from other districts. And then there's a district participation fee as well for being part of the Willamette Promise. So we're able to fund that entirely from Measure 98 funds. We're also able to provide students with access to college transcript fees if they are economically disadvantaged. So we've been able to remove a barrier there that may have existed for some students around just even being able to open up a transcript at Western Oregon University so that they can start gaining their credits that way. As we look ahead to the coming school year, most, but not all, of the activities that I've just described to you will be going forward. Obviously, we don't need to spend money again on the development of a data suite, but we are going to utilize it. And in fact, we're excited about being able to support 8th grade and 9th grade teams at each of the secondary schools who can use this new data system and examine trends, and then hopefully make some decisions around appropriate interventions when we're seeing that students are not making the adequate progress that they need. We also do intend to continue funding the expansion of CTEC programs. So when the Phase 4 programs come in for law enforcement and for business development and leadership, this will be the resource that helps to make that happen. Happy to take your questions at this point.
Kelly, earlier in the evening, we had a presentation on College Credit Now. Why Willamette Promise over College Credit Now, since we already have over 1,000 students doing the College Credit Now? What's the advantage to our students of taking Willamette Promise over College Credit Now? And what's the success rate with Willamette Promise?
Thank you for the question. Actually, I don't see it as one over the other. It's
you only list one.
Right. Okay. So this is interesting. In the verbiage around this particular fund, we are not able to spend money on things we have spent money on before. Does that make sense? So we can't just supplant expenditures that we had before. These need to be supplemental. The one exception that they made was promise activities. And so districts are able to fund things like the Willamette Promise or the Eastern Promise through their Measure 98 resource.
Success rate?
It's highly validated and the success rate is high. I can give you specific data.
Yes, please.
I don't have it right in front of me.
Please, because
I
that's
will
not what I
say
hear.
that we deeply value our partnership with Shemeketa and continue to have College Credit Now as a strong component. And I'm guessing that we have about a 50-50 distribution of dual credit opportunities in our high schools. That's a guess, but I think that's probably fairly accurate. And what we've noticed about College Credit Now is because it relies on the ability to produce a certain credential or academic background that then is subject to a faculty department's determination whether they meet the criteria for approval or not. We had a number of places where the ability to even offer college credit at our high schools was very uneven. It's even more true in portions of the state where access to that sort of educator gets very, very challenging.
But
and so what we
Salem-Keizer,
like
is that
about
true? I
Yes,
understand you're
yes.
talking about the state.
Yeah,
But
it has been true in
Salem-Keizer, is
Salem.
that then an equity issue?
Yes, it absolutely has. Places where we'll have one teacher who has the appropriate approvals and can offer a section, and right next door, same class is taught by a teacher who didn't meet the faculty's approval. And what we like about this ability with the Willamette Promise is you need to have been successfully teaching for 3 years, and then you participate in trainings with a college professor and with your colleagues through a PLC process. But the focus is really on outcomes with the student learning. Their demonstration of the mastery of the content is at the heart and soul of the Willamette Promise. So students have to show that they are able to succeed at the college level in order to earn the college credit.
The Phase 4 CTEC expansion for $1.5 million, is that for staff and program support just like the other one?
Yes, it's for staffing, it's for positions for these programs, and then also some equipment and materials.
Okay, how much more staff are we getting for each? Do we have the numbers for that?
I can bring you those numbers. I don't have them off the top of my head, however.
I would like to know, that'd be good.
Yeah, you bet.
On the, and I apologize if it is in the answers to all of the Budget Committee questions. I haven't been able to make it through those yet. But on the CTE participant and concentrator graduation rates, so how many actual students, not percentages, are we talking about? And what's the difference between in numbers of students that participate that don't concentrate?
Your first question, I can answer half of that. The second question gets harder, and it's because of the way the data is collected and reported. We know that in 2015-16, we had 6,000 participants in CTE, and then last year in 16-17, we had 6,700, so that was a 12% increase. We don't have the data for this year yet, because the way it gets quantified is we actually just send a very large volume of our student data to the Oregon Department of Education. And they bring back to us the data about not just participants, but concentrators. And we look forward to the day when the concentrator data is more readily available than it is right now. But it takes a few months for us to get that information back from the state. So I can't quantify for you the differences between participants and concentrators. And another reason for that is that this whole calculation effort that's going on at the Oregon Department of Education is a fairly new thing. That's why you'll see in that chart that you were given the not applicable cells in the chart, because at that point they weren't doing that calculation.
So can you give us a directional sense of the difference between participants and concentrators? I mean, is it half of the students that participate in CTE end up being concentrators? Is it substantially less than that? I mean, I understand it's not going to be a precise number, and I'm not going to hold you to it, but some kind of sense, because we're seeing and being presented with percentages of graduation rates for these two categories,
Sure.
but we don't have any relative sense of what the relationship is between those two groups.
What I can tell you with certainty is that we've surpassed the 50% mark of overall CTE participants. And so concentrators should be a significant portion of that. I'll see if our friend Jim Orth, our director of CTE, can give us more specificity than that.
Again, it'd be more of a guess, but I would estimate probably about 2/3 of the students that are participants end up being concentrators as well.
Okay, great, thank you.
Maybe even higher, but I think it's probably a fair guess.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions with regards to Measure 98? Okay, I'm going to take just a pause here. Thank you. I'm going to take a pause because it's 8:45 and we're going to look at our agenda. Some of us have been here since about 5, so we have one other presentation, which was the Avid presentation. I don't know if that's doable in 15 minutes. I think we were planning to be here till about 9. Who is doing the Avid presentation?
Kelly, yeah.
Would that, so I'll ask first, would that be okay with folks?
Can you do it in 15? Or do we want to go to questions? I
I'll stay till midnight.
You'll be here by yourself. You will be here by yourself.
You'll be under arrest by Salem Police for trespassing.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that, since that's what we had on the agenda, was those 3 presentations. And then that will give us, well, we're not going to go much past 9, so if we have a lot of questions, we'll have to defer those to the next
Sure.
meeting. We have quite a few questions that staff responded to that I know a lot of us haven't had a chance to go through yet, so that will be carried forward to next Tuesday as well. So, thank you.
Certainly, thank you. Given that the questions that came to us regarding Avid was a fairly comprehensive set, we felt like it would be helpful to do a presentation and share the bigger picture of Avid. And I hope that in doing so, I'm able to answer the questions that were raised. And then, of course, if there are additional questions, I'll be happy to get more information for everyone. Avid stands for Advancement via Individual Determination. It is a system of specific supports that are designed to ensure that equity is being addressed in ways that we help keep the bar high for our students, while we provide the appropriate supports to help them reach and exceed those high expectations. So to clarify, Avid is a nonprofit organization that engages educators in far more than just a collection of good teaching practices. Inside the handout that you received, you'll see that Avid is about systems, leadership, culture, and instructional strategies that are proving to increase access and opportunity for our students. And it's the ones who have typically not demonstrated college readiness all on their own. So this is true for the 2 million students that participate in Avid globally, but it's also true for the 2,735 students in Salem-Keizer that are direct participants in Avid. The majority of these students are from economically disadvantaged backgrounds, and they are often also in underrepresented subpopulations. So Avid represents for Salem-Keizer one of the most effective strategies for equity in our school district. And remember that in equity work, we confront the reality that the playing field is not level. Things are not equal across the board. Some households have more than others, and for students, our focus on equity work is to ensure that all of them have access and opportunity. And it's the outcomes that tell the story of whether the work is moving us in the right direction. So we've pulled some data that might help illustrate this pretty well. Here you see Claggett Creek Middle School. The blue represents Claggett Creek. The orange-ish red represents comparison schools in Oregon. This happens to be how the students perform in grades 5, 6, 7, and 8. So we started with the 5th grade SBAC achievement from their feeder elementary schools, and you can see that they performed a little lower than their comparison schools in Oregon in the 5th grade. And then you can see what happens in English language arts at Claggett Creek Middle School as the students progress through the grade levels. And you can see what happens in math. The same is holding true at Adam Stevens Middle School, where we see students starting in the 5th grade as they, it's spring of their 5th grade, so it's just about time to come into middle school, and they're significantly behind their counterparts. But then look at what happens by the time they finish 8th grade. And that's true as well in math. So last year we had the rare experience of celebrating with Adam Stevens Middle School and Claggett Creek as they were honored as school-wide sites of distinction in Avid, and they actually became national demonstration schools. That's rare because currently there's only one other school in Oregon with that designation up in Park Rose. So I wanted you to see these results so that you could clearly see the progression by comparing what these students are doing as you look at their comparison schools from other places around the state. We believe that part of the reason that these students are beating the odds is what's happening inside the school. You see, the data here isn't just the Avid kids. That's school-wide. This reflects all of the students in their respective middle schools. And these outcomes are happening for them because of the continuity of school-wide systems. All of our secondary schools have Avid systems in place. They offer Avid classes for students who will benefit significantly from college readiness instruction and practice. And for Salem-Keizer, that journey can begin as an elective in the middle school, and it continues all the way through graduation. For English learners who are in our Title I middle schools, there's also an elective specifically for accelerating students' academic language skills in English and helping them to prepare for rigorous learning at the high school level. So we offer Avid Excel electives for grades 6, 7, and 8 at Claggett Creek, Houck, Parrish, Stevens, and Waldo. You'll see in the by the numbers data later in your handout, but for illustration, I thought it might be helpful for you to see it on this screen as well. While I share with you our electives offerings and Excel offerings. The Avid elective focuses on student-centric problem solving rather than just delivering content to the students in a more lecture-based format. The student-centered approach ensures that people that do most of the talking are the students. And so the students get the opportunity to master content through their own inquiry and collaboration. They're reinforced with note-taking, studying, and organizing assignments, skills that are going to be helpful to them in every content area, not just in reading and math. Avid Excel focuses on professional learning for teachers of bilingual students and specifically English learners. It also focuses on family connections, biliteracy, and offers the Excel elective that provides explicit instruction in English language development and academic language through reading, writing, oral language, academic vocabulary, and college readiness skills. And then finally, the school-wide piece is a system that builds upon teacher collective efficacy. So all of the teachers in the school share a common system of language and practices and beliefs that are needed to ensure that the students, as they move throughout the school, are seeing a common thread and not a completely different system in every classroom. So what does Avid cost? Well, on average, a high school will spend $34,451 to bring Avid support to their students. A middle school spends $15,374. And the majority of these expenditures pay for the tutors who bring support directly to these students. Most of the tutors are college students, and they are integrated into the Avid elective classes. They serve as academic role models for the kids, and they help to facilitate an inquiry-driven process that reinforces the skills and strategies that they have learned that can help solve academic problems. The total district expenditure for tutors last year was $288,000, and this year to date we've spent about $254,000, but we'll probably reach that same amount by the end, by the end of the school year. Each school also pays $3,500 for their annual dues to Avid. So this $3,500 expense provides all teachers in the school full access to resources that are online, which include daily lesson plans for all elective classes, professional learning models, a database of highly relevant and engaging texts, and resources for strategies such as collaborative study groups, philosophical chairs, etc. All available with a click. Teachers also get free access to professional learning opportunities around the state, with content available for Avid elective teachers, site coordinators, and school-wide professional development. So a recent example of a school-wide piece was developing your Avid students as leaders. There's also on-site coaching available to the schools. So students who participate in our Avid elective classes get an opportunity to visit a college campus each year. And you'll see that in your handout that schools spend a portion of their resource on college visitations. They get the opportunity to tour the campus, meet with student ambassadors at the school, visit classes, hear from financial aid and admissions staff, and understand academic life. This typically does not happen for students without this opportunity provided through Avid. Family engagement might involve things such as parent nights, FAFSA completion, scholarship support, and celebration events, such as tomorrow night's Avid graduation that some of you will be attending. There are also award nights, potlucks, and college signing days where we strongly encourage parents to come and be part of the celebrations. So when we look at what the district spends on Avid professional learning, we can tell you that we spend on average about $603 per staff member on things that are specifically Avid related for training. And typically that will be PATH trainings and the Summer Institute. So in district, we can provide PATH trainings during the summer, and those things might be science, critical reading, math, academic language, student success. And then also support for Avid elective teachers and coordinators in their regular PLC work. Out-of-district training is typically, the largest portion of that is the Summer Institute, where we pay for travel and registration costs. We offer PDUs and an opportunity for teachers to earn graduate credit and tuition reimbursement. And then during the school year, when educators attend the trainings, they are paid either for the additional time or we pay for the substitute to cover their classroom while they're at those trainings. Our district Avid staff, you see that figure at the bottom of that page. They help us to ensure that each of our secondary schools is fully meeting the 73 criteria that are required for ongoing certification in Avid. They also provide professional development and support for Avid Excel and Office support. Going farther into the handout, you'll see that we've provided you with an example for each level, how a middle school and a high school will spend their money and how that's broken down. You'll see that we have some other sources beyond the general fund. So in addition to the general fund, schools that have Title I dollars can use that. And that's typically between $3,000 and $4,000 of Title I money that schools might use. And then you can see also that Nike provides a grant. We use some Perkins dollars, and SCEF has been a supporter of Avid as well. On the right, you can see what we have paid to the Avid Center, and the majority of that is going to registration costs for the professional learning. Let me come back. Anybody who works in the arena of college readiness knows that you can't really get very far with just a bundle of good teaching strategies. In order to address the needs of the whole student and get them ready for college, you have to address the needs of the whole school. That's why school-wide culture, systems, and leadership are emphasized alongside the instruction. And you'll see this on the next pages in your report under the title Avid Overview. We've provided you with descriptions of each of the 4 components. I'll let you read them on your own, but we did pull out a couple of items as examples. Focused note-taking, for instance, is a strategy students can use in every class. It involves the process of frequent and ongoing interaction with the content of what you wrote on those notes. The multiple contacts gives you a much better and deeper knowledge of the content. Strategic college readiness planning is called out as a leadership piece, and it encourages staff members to closely examine student data and look at structures and identifying barriers that might exist inside the school. We've provided you with some information on our seniors, and you can see some percentages there that might be helpful for you to quantify how many of them, what percentage of non-white students are participating, for instance. Looking at their graduation rate, 99% and 100% over the last 3 years. How many of them are participating in courses of rigor. And then at the bottom, we're pretty proud of the progression that's being noted around scholarships being awarded to these students. At noon today, the scholarship figure was $8.5 million, but we were having a hard time nailing that number down because it keeps growing. So we're holding on for $9 million by tomorrow. You'll see that in the handout that you got, that graphic shows up again about the by the numbers. Inside those numbers of student participants in the Avid elective, I would want you to know that 90% of our Avid students come from economically disadvantaged backgrounds. They come as English learners. They come from special circumstances, perhaps being the first generation in their family to go to college, or maybe they're homeless, or they're a foster student, or maybe there's been a death in the immediate family. The other 10% can be students who may have fewer disadvantages than that, but they still show a great need for the Avid supports. And so I also just pulled some data. I'm sorry that it's not in your handout, but we can certainly provide it for you so that you can start to see the breakdown of the students who are participating in Avid by gender, also by ethnicity and race. So there's the number, and there's the percentages, which show that we have a concentration of students of color and students who are economically disadvantaged. And then finally, I have some data here for you on the breakdown of students by gender. And again, I can share all of that information with you in an email so that you can look a little bit more closely at the data. So at the end of this handout, you'll see that data again for Claggett Creek and Stevens. And I would just encourage you to look at that data. I gave it to you in bar graphs. But you'll see towards the end of the handout that it's also provided for you in a specific data set. I would want you to notice a correlation between that strong academic outcome for students, and the percentage of students who have been trained in Avid, and the percentage of teachers, did I say students? Percentage of teachers who are trained in Avid, and the percentage of teachers who are using Avid strategies routinely in their classrooms. This is how we get to school-wide use of strategies. It's where we get to students seeing that these strategies aren't just for English and math class, but across all of their classes. And as you see the percentage of overall district staff attending and being part of these trainings, similar data is beginning to emerge. So we also provided you with some data from McNary High School. Looks a little different than data from a middle school because some of our metrics are different. But again, we're seeing some very promising results as their participation rate increases. We believe that the results in student achievement are giving us a picture of student success that is compelling. It's making a difference in educational equity, and it is indeed increasing opportunities for all of our students.
Okay, so I see a hand. Paul.
I want to make sure I'm understanding what you're trying to tell me. So for $218,799, we're performing miracles with our minority students.
Tell me which figure you're looking at for the 218,000.
The one you gave me on the inside of the first page. That's what you say. It says right here, District Avid FTE. I'm not sure what that means.
Okay, the District Avid FTE at the bottom of the page.
So just give me the bottom line dollar amount, because I can add all the numbers, but tell me what you think the bottom line dollar amount is.
$900,000.
Okay. That's great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
It may be that it's just late and I'm not doing math very well, but on that slide, the Avid student male and female percentages, shouldn't those add up to 100%?
That represents the overall district middle schoolers and high schoolers. What percentage of the overall middle schoolers who participate in Avid are male?
So 10% of all
Middle and high school males.
males participate in Avid, and
Yes.
16%
Okay.
of
Thank you.
females.
Because it's all students.
I'm assuming, though you didn't show it, that if you took a random middle school that didn't have school-wide Avid, that the test score growth would not be as dramatic compared to comparable schools statewide.
Correct. It's still proving to be effective, but obviously we wanted to show you what happens when school-wide
I just
is
sort of
reached.
wanted to
Yeah.
get a sense of the, what Avid did for the school rather than what, if we just had wonderful middle schools, even without Avid, so just to get a sense.
Well, we think our middle schools are wonderful, but we think bringing Avid in is a strong strategy.
The one bar was comparable middle schools throughout the state.
Right, so what my question was, if you took a Salem-Keizer middle school that didn't have Avid, would they remain fairly comparable to the schools
Didn't have
throughout the
Avid
state?
school-wide.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I think I saw another hand this direction. Jesse?
Okay, so I had two questions. So the one where it says Avid by the numbers, and it shows 2017, 2018, 3,391. Is that the total amount of students that Avid, that did anything with Avid?
These would be the students who participate in either the Avid elective class or the Avid Excel class. So you see that the 3,391 figure is the first time that we've combined those numbers together.
Got it.
Prior to that, the 2,700 figure and earlier represented just students who participated in the Avid elective.
Got it. Okay, and then the data for the achievement by Avid Excel students. Do you have like charts and stuff like this? Because EOL would be like the English language learners, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Do we have one that compares them to students who aren't learning English at the same time, like all of the same stuff, like the attendance rate, discipline referrals for students who aren't an English language
So the
learner?
first page there compares students in Avid Excel to all English learners. The second page compares the same group, Avid Excel student participants, with students who have successfully exited the English Learner Program. Does that help?
Sure. But do we have just an overall one with overall students, nothing to do with anything with language or race or anything like that? Just all students
Just the
in
all.
general? Yeah.
Yes.
That's what this is?
No, we don't have it on the charts
Oh.
tonight.
Okay.
We can get that for you, though.
But am I understanding Excel is specifically focused on English language learners?
Correct. It provides support for students to learn and practice the use of academic language as they prepare to advance into high school, where the content becomes much more academically vocabulary rich.
I'm trying to figure out how to ask my question. How do we know that the students going into Avid or any program for that matter that they weren't going to graduate already to begin with? That they were, do we know before they come into the program if they're on track to graduate, or what makes them like go into that?
That's a really wonderful question. I will tell you that the work of identifying the right students for Avid involves looking closely at students who appear to be in the academic middle. So Avid is not intended to be the intervention that you apply to the student who is significantly and severely not at grade level. It's the student who shows the ability to comprehend but needs a lot more practice with skills and strategies that ensure academic success. So there are a lot of reasons why you might not pass a class. And some of them might be around how organized you are, or do you have a method of keeping track of your notes and coming back to them? Are you engaged enough in critical thinking when you're doing your reading and writing? So Avid works at that level to support students who have demonstrated somewhere in the academic middle and have aspirations for themselves to go on to college, but they're going to need help if they're going to actually realize that dream.
So if I can follow up, so do you have that data then that you could say, as a profile of the Avid students, these students have grown from before?
I think we could probably provide you with some information about what school teams do to identify the students that they'd like to intentionally invite into Avid.
Because the reason I'm asking that question, and if you, whatever you can pull together would be great. But if this sounds like a great program, and based on the numbers, it is a great program. But I think we also need to make sure that it's benefiting the students who should be most impacted. So it's that it's not students who, if they hadn't taken Avid, that they would have still graduated, they would have still performed high, but that it's really the ones that need it. So I think that would help make the case stronger for this program and for any other, also for the CTE programs. That type of data, I think, would be helpful to say this is how this program has impacted, has benefited the students in the district.
It may also be helpful for you to read or hear some of the stories that students will describe for themselves about where they were at academically prior to their participation in Avid, and then what Avid has done for them in terms of sharpening their focus and giving them the confidence to move forward. That might also be helpful, because while we might be able to share with you our processes, I think the students have a really compelling story to share.
So I'd like to follow up on that. But going back to your point that 90% of Avid students are identified as, I can't remember the term used, so they.
Economically disadvantaged and
But-
underrepresented.
Okay, so
Mhm.
all of those. So
Mhm.
we know that those students may be at risk regardless,
Mhm.
so, okay. Sorry, Marie.
I was just going to recommend that Levy might want to schedule a tour at Adam Stevens. It was very enlightening to me. You know, we went into classrooms, we saw some of the things the kids were doing. They would have a table. One student would have a problem, they'd write it on the board, and then the other students would help them not answer the question, but ask questions to help the student learn to answer their own question. And one of those would be like the college student. I know my son had participated at one time. I had no idea what he was really doing. Now I understand. And sometimes it's not, maybe it's just an 8th grader, but that's really good at a subject. So it's really insightful to take a look at it, you know, right there, where they're doing it.
Sorry, I just want to clarify. I'm not questioning the effectiveness of this program. The reason I'm asking is because I want to help us make the case that Avid is working, that it's benefiting students that really need it. So I haven't. I should do that. I haven't done it recently, but I've worked with a lot of Avid students, and we have one of the sites my organization works in. We have several Avid families, so I've heard those stories,
Mhm.
which is always great to combine data with stories.
Yeah.
Just to make the case. So I just want to make sure that you're not misunderstanding that I'm questioning the effectiveness of Avid. But
Are we
but I think
focusing it
we need
on
to make
the
a strong
right
case.
population of
Yeah.
students? Yep. Thank you.
So a sort of data follow-up line of thought for what Levy was just saying. Do we know what percentage of that middle target group, so the profile of who would be the target audience, what percentage of those students actually end up in an Avid program? And you don't have to answer this now. And if we know students that are in that target group, then we actually have a control group that we could look at the data on and do a comparison of percentage of graduation and attendance and all of the other things that you've looked at.
Mhm.
And I think that would be really powerful information to back up what Levy's asking about.
You bet.
So that brings me to our point about additional questions related to Avid or other presentations. So before we give you a big laundry list of additional questions, I think we were going to see if there are additional questions next week that can be answered but you've provided us a lot of information, and so before we ask you to go back and pull a lot more data, run numbers and things like that, I think this may be a point where we need to apply either the process or have a conversation about what are the additional questions, and then we can make that decision. So, because we know we've asked you to pull a lot of information related to Avid, but it sounds like there's still some questions that may be fairly easy to answer. But anything that's going to require a lot of staff time, we agreed as a budget committee we would make a decision about collectively about how much additional work we want you to do. So,
thank you.
All right, so do you want to attempt that tonight? Do you want to have that as a process later, before next week?
Well, we don't have a whole lot of time left.
I know.
So, and keeping in mind perspective of what we still need to get through next week. Hold on. Sorry, not you. I was pointing at Marty. Sorry. We still have all the questions that were asked by budget committee members that we haven't had a chance to look at yet. We still have, again, we have 1 week left, one budget committee meeting left. So we want to make sure all of our questions related to Avid are answered. However, we have a lot of other questions that committee members asked that we want to make sure that we get.
Questions
Yes.
timely.
Okay. Go ahead.
My question or comment is, we all, I think, or a lot of us agree, Avid's a good program. Is getting more data and answering more questions going to change our recommendation for the budget? And if not, wouldn't we rather focus the areas we're concerned about in the budget and not getting more information on something we're not going to change?
Right. Okay. Well, and based on that, should we go ahead and, oh, sorry, Kathy, go ahead.
I guess I'm adding an Avid question after what you said. So here we sit in a district with significant dropout rates, and we're spending a ton of money on those kids in the middle. Is that what's helping us have such a low graduation rate? I mean, what's being done to get kids clear down that are headed in the wrong direction? Does nothing in Avid or not being identified as an Avid kid, they aren't benefiting from any of that?
I would love to be able to respond to that question, but it would take a while because we would be talking again about school-wide systems that benefit all students. I would want to talk about our targeted resources around graduation coaches, the connections programs, and some other things that we do to re-engage students who have dropped out or re-engage students who show signs of being really close to that. Because typically that's not an academic problem, it's oftentimes something more related to social emotional learning. We'd love to be able to talk about that.
I guess I would wrap it up, and it's kind of a rough comment, but those things aren't reducing our graduation rates significantly. I mean, they go up a tiny bump and what have you.
So where we are now is what additional questions do we have outstanding with regards to Avid? I think, Mark, if you can articulate the data question that you have, and we can decide as a committee, do we want to make that additional request? There were some other questions related to Avid that Levy had asked that might not require a lot of additional staff time.
I guess the threshold question would be, is it even possible with a lot of staff time to answer the question the way I framed it? Or is this actually a question for a future year where you actually collect that kind of data from the schools? And it's completely possible that that's the response.
I would need to know a couple of technical answers, technical responses from the folks who hold our data for us in order to be able to respond.
Okay. I mean, I'm
That's a
willing-
reasonable, yeah.
Okay. So I guess I would withdraw the request for this year, but really encourage you to look at that kind of way of analyzing the data. And it's one of those things where it's possible that the response would be, we need to actually be ramping up Avid, because we're not hitting a high enough percentage, and the differential between the control group and the Avid group is significant enough that we'd like to actually dedicate more resources to it. So I think it's useful information to the budget committee in a process in the context of Kathy's question.
Thanks.
Maybe we can ramp up Avid to ramp down to the kids that aren't benefiting from it.
Okay, so again, it's almost 9:30, so I think that we've come to an agreement on Mark's question, and I think that it's a really good comment and suggestion. So are there other outstanding questions at this point that with regards to the Avid program in this presentation, or additional questions of staff related to Avid?
Sure.
sorry.
Okay, so my one question is, because I don't want to keep you guys here till midnight. It's basically just our job as a budget committee, of course, isn't to argue whether or not something's a good program, because I believe most things we have are good programs. Otherwise, why the heck are we spending money on it? I believe our job as a budget committee is to ensure that the dollar that we're spending we're getting the best bang for our buck. That's kind of the point of the budget committee. And so my one question would be, if we're spending $900,000, which if you compare it to our whole budget, isn't that significant, right? But $900,000 is a lot to taxpayers. So I would say, is what we're getting out of Avid worth that $900,000 is kind of what we're looking at. And so my question would be, are there other programs that are less expensive but kind of similar? And do we really need the brand of Avid to do this? Or could we hire somebody, pay less than $900,000 and get the same results? I don't know if that's, I don't know how you could answer that or what that would be looking at. But if it's possible, or if there's any other alternative solutions, as far as the budget is concerned, that'd be a good thing to hear. So is that like a number that we can get, or am I just spewing out things right now?
I think Avid is our strategy. It's been in our strategic plan, and I think what we should do as a board, if this is important to the board, to switch strategies, we should spend the time thinking about with a group, is this the right strategy? Because at this point in the budget process, it would be a big detour from our strategic plan.
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, yeah, well then if we're not even putting it on the table to get rid of it, then why are we spending so much time?
Because there were questions about how much is it costing, and so we didn't have that data. So that's what was provided tonight, was numbers, how many students, success rate of those students in the programs. We didn't have that level of detail, so.
And I wouldn't recommend, but maybe somebody on the budget committee might choose to take something out of the budget, is why it came up. It wouldn't be my recommendation at this time.
Okay, so I think we've probably reached our capacity for this evening. So what we have next on next week's agenda, we still have, with regards to answers to committee questions, we have the written responses for us to review. And I think the process is, if we have additional questions, that's the time that we can ask those next week. We also will be setting aside, again, time for public comment as well. So
I guess here's what I would hope between now and next week. You would look at the answers to the questions. If you, and through the lens of what do I need as a budget committee member to approve the budget. And if you think that you still have unanswered questions, could you send those to us just so we can begin thinking about, is it something that we could reasonably even answer for you? So that's the lens. Read through the questions. We'll spend time on them. If they're, if just need clarification, we can do that in the moment. But if there's something that's really missing for you to approve the budget, and you know that ahead of time, that would be helpful for us.
So out of the public testimony that we had this evening, so I obviously don't have the budget document memorized, but I couldn't immediately think that there were answers to a couple of the things that were raised, and I wonder if we might right now ask for that information so that it could come back at next week's meeting. So the two that I didn't know we had answers to was the school-based health assistance for elementary and drug and alcohol counseling. Yep. If you could come, my request would be if you could come back with what would those price tags be for those two programs that were specifically mentioned in public comment.
Yep, those are easy.
And in addition to that, we had a couple questions that have come up since then. The success rate and data on the Willamette Promise, and that was, you have that data?
I think we have that data.
Okay, if you have that data. And I think, Jesse, you asked how many positions would we be getting at CTEC for the additional $1.5 million. if we can find out the number of positions.
Super easy as well.
Yeah.
Clarify for me what happens, the 12.9 that was the controversy tonight from the public, what's happening to those? What are we reinstating? And what we aren't reinstating, can that be used as a trade as chips?
Yep.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments before we adjourn at 9:25? Okay, well, thank you, and thank you especially to staff for the additional reports and the time. So with that, the Budget Committee meeting is adjourned.